Hi, I'm Jim Wynorski, and I'm here today to make some words happen and some clips and whatever you want. You know, it's kind of free form. But I've just been asked what influenced me as a child. And I grew up in New York, and we had like all the stations. We had, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. And they were all, commercial stations that ran old movies and TV shows. And I was influenced by those shows a lot. I saw a lot of horror movies on television, and I really enjoyed them. My first movie experience, though, is that every Sunday my dad would take me out on an adventure. He'd take me to a stream or farm, someplace on Long Island that was kind of cool. And one day we were passing the Cove Theater in Glen Cove, and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, that's a movie theater." And I said, "Can we go in?" And I walked into my movie theater for the first time, and I must have been like 5 or 6, and there was a Lucille Ball movie playing, and I can't tell you what it was, but it starred James Mason and Lucille Ball. And I walked in, I was being carried by my dad, and it was dark, and it was big, and it was cavernous, actually, because it was an old theater. And I walked in, and my dad picked me up and took me into the balcony, and I started watching this movie. And James Mason plays a ghost in this movie, and he was arguing with Lucille Ball. And then Lucille Ball runs away from him into the bathroom, closes the door, and James Mason shows up in the mirror. Scared the hell out of me. I was 5, I was 6. I said, "That's not logical. He's not how did he get in the mirror?" And I made a big fuss and said, "Get me out of here." And my dad took me out. And I think he told me I had nightmares for a month after about going to that theater. And I just couldn't make myself want to go to a theater anymore because I thought it was going to be scary. So Quaker Oats had this competition or thing where you would get a ticket to see Forbidden Planet if you bought a carton of Quaker Oats. And my mom always bought Quaker Oats, and she says, "Here, we got this in the Quaker Oats thing. Do you want to go see this movie with your dad?" I said, "Sure." So my first ever experience at the movies was going to see Forbidden Planet. Big, widescreen color, and I really enjoyed it. I thought the monster was kind of wild because it was a cartoon, and I didn't get scared by that. I loved Robbie the Robot, and it kind of like, all that sunk into a 6-year-old and said, "Make sci-fi, okay?" And from there on, I think the next movie my dad took me to was Rio Bravo with John Wayne and Angie Dickinson, who I worked with later on in my career. I told her this story. I said, I walked in to see Rio Bravo, and I said, "Oh, it was a kind of a cool movie." And I was in her trailer when we were making Big Bad Mama 2, and she was loving this story. And so anyway, I started off going to a lot of movies when I was a kid. I think the first experience was always it's always a shock to go into these black, big, giant places. Today, I wouldn't think it would be so bad because the theaters are smaller. But this theater happened to be one of those old 1920s theaters, just one screen, and was huge, no longer there. And but when I walked in, I said, "This is good." And it's just smell of popcorn that was just so overwhelming. I think my dad bought me some popcorn, and we went home. And I told my mom the story, and then said, "I'm never going back." Well, I did.
Did you know when did it start sinking into you, like, this is what I'm going to just be? Would that happen at a young age, or
it didn't happen that young. I did enjoy watching sci-fi on TV. Between the time I was 6 and 10, shows like Saturday Night at the Movies would occasionally show like an old sci-fi movie like Day the Earth Stood Still. And I remember seeing the trailer for that on TV, and I'm saying, "Oh, I got to see that. It's got a robot in it." And so I watched that, and I watched it every time it was on. My dad then finally when I was 9, took me to see Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, which again reinforces you into loving sci-fi. I mean, if you see Forbidden Planet and then Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, you're covered on every angle. Every angle. There's nothing to go back that says start watching dramas or real dramas. It's sci-fi and fantasy from there on in. And it was a great experience. And I remember standing in line. It was the first movie I ever stood in line for. My dad took me to a place called Port Washington, because it was far. Seventh Voyage didn't play in my town. It had played in a faraway town, but I saw a trailer for it, and I begged. I said, "Please, please, 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 take me to Port Washington, so I could see this movie." And so he did. He took me there, and there was a huge line of kids. It was a matinee, 1:00 in the afternoon on Saturday, and he says, "You don't want to stay for this?" I said, "Yeah, I do." So we walked in, and then that Bernard Herrmann music hits, and you're sold as a kid, because something great's going to happen. The one thing I didn't think about at the time, and didn't think about, was that all the music from the shows I liked and the movies I liked were being done by one guy, and I never caught on to that for a while. The first time I noticed it, because Twilight Zone came on, and that was scored by Bernard Herrmann. Day the Earth Stood Still, Bernard Herrmann. Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Bernard Herrmann. Then I saw Mysterious Island in 1961. I think I was 11 or 10 at the time. And I loved that movie so much that I stayed for a second show. And then I said, well, I'll stay for a third show. That's when the cops showed up. My mother thought I was kidnapped and sent cops to the theater to find her 11-year-old kid or 10-year-old kid who was sitting there in the theater watching the third, play of Mysterious Island. And I went home, I said, geez, I love that music. I love that film. And of course, when you go to the record store when you're a kid, there's no soundtracks for these movies. And it was only later, I think when I was like 15, that somebody told me there's a Seventh Voyage of Sinbad soundtrack. So I did all this nonsense to find it. No record stores anywhere in my area had it, because I had my mom drive me to like Sam Goody's and School Street Music and all these other places that were selling LPs, but you couldn't find that anywhere. And I actually called a record distributor in Farmingdale, Long Island, and he said, oh yeah, we have a copy. And I said, and I asked my dad to take me to Farmingdale, and he wouldn't. He said, what's over there? He says, oh, I want a record. He says, there's records all in your room. And he wouldn't take me to Farmingdale. So I missed out at that point. I eventually did get it, but, I was kind of, by then I was reading Famous Monsters of Filmland, and they had all kinds of ads in the back for records and books and whatever, and films. I was buying the little Castle films, 8mm, because it was like, I want that movie. And, you'd go to, there was places like Macy's and Corvettes, which if you went to their camera department, they sold these little 8mm movies. And I loved those. My uncle had a projector, and I continually borrowed it and watched these little 50-foot reels of old films. And it was great. I mean, to me, that was like a precursor to home video. But I had to have them. Had to have them.
So you had a collection of 8mm films.
Oh, of course. I still have them somewhere in storage. But, yeah, they were in little tiny boxes, and they were all put out by Castle Films, which was like a subsidiary of Universal Pictures. And, you know, anything that was out from Universal was usually on Castle Films, like This Island Earth. They changed the title to War of the Planets, but it was This Island Earth. And what I longed for, and finally got eventually, but what I longed for was sound. I mean, there was a thing I saw at one point. I don't remember who put it out, but it was a film and a record. And it was a film silent, and it was of Horror of Dracula, which is a film again, a Universal picture, but it included was one of those plastic records that you could put on your record player, and if you synced it up, which is impossible because the sound always drifted from the picture, but if you'd have to slow your projector down or speed it up, and it would actually kind of sync up. So I had that for a while, and I said, this is the closest I'm ever going to get. But then, of course, later on, I bought a 16mm projector and bought a lot of illegal 16mm prints of movies. I think the first one I ever bought was Day the Earth Stood Still. And then I owned a print of Mysterious Island. And, of course, the big deal then was the FBI was looking for you, okay? And so I had to hide my films in my house, like they couldn't find them behind the couch, but they were behind the couch. And so I had, some illegal movies, and then some I bought, legally. In New York, there was a place that sold 16mm films, probably illegally, but I bought them anyway. I had Invaders from Mars, and I had, a bunch of movies that I really enjoyed. And and back then, these movies cost me like $150, $200, and that was a lot of money back in those days. Okay, in my town, I had a place called Thompson's Bookstore, and it sold comics 3 for a dime. Back then, comics were a dime, so if you were getting 3 for a dime, you were doing great, okay? And people would turn in their old comics. He bought them for a penny and sold them 3 for a dime. So this guy was making a ton of money. But anyway, I would always go in there after school and see if he had any new comics. And I got a lot of my DC collection extended because I would go in there and some mom had thrown their kids' comics out, and I would just buy them, scoop them up and buy them all. Anyway, I walked in there one day, and there was in the comic bin was a copy of Famous Monsters #7 with Zachary on the front cover. And I said, oh my God, what's this? And I was thrilled because I was getting it for 3 for a dime. So I bought it, took it home, read it again, and read it again. And I said, this is #7, so there's 6 more I didn't see. And so I then started looking for it at a local magazine place. It was a kind of a newspaper place called Levine's that sold, cold soda, candy, comics, magazines, newspapers, etc. It was like a newsstand, and it was in my town, and all the kids hung out there. There was a place called Levine's is right next to a diner that made hamburgers and French fries and hot dogs and stuff. So after school, that was a block away from my school, so we'd all go up there, buy a soda, and maybe a candy bar, and then go see what was out. And every Tuesdays and Thursday, the new comics would come in. So they'd put them on Tuesdays. So those were big days. And so that's where I found Famous Monsters #8, 9, and I started buying them every time they came out. I remember the big one was the Gorgo issue. Okay, there was a Gorgo issue, and that, I think, was #11. But Gorgo was scheduled to play in New York, and somehow I missed it. I don't know how I missed it, but it didn't play locally. We had 3 theaters in Glen Cove, and that was a big deal. There were 3 different theaters playing 3 different movies every weekend. That's where I saw Goldfinger, and it's a lot of movies, but the sci-fi movies kind of didn't play in Glen Cove. And there was a place called Roslyn, which was like, it wasn't very far away by car. It was like 10 minutes by car, but it was an hour bicycle trip. And my mom didn't want me to go to Roslyn on my bike because she said, I'll have to come and get you and bring you back because you'll be tired. And I said, well, okay, but I still went anyway. I bought a friend along, and we pedaled to Roslyn to see Mutiny in Outer Space, okay? Which had a great poster, but we got in, it's a black and white movie. And I was not thrilled by seeing a black and white movie because the poster was in color. So I think that curtailed my trips to Roslyn because I pedaled so long and I got a crappy black and white movie. Even if it was good, I would have enjoyed it. But I don't think it was even a good movie at the time. I haven't seen it in 50 years. Anyway, that was it. There were a lot of theaters, so I saw a lot of movies. TV ran everything. I mean, if it was out, it was probably playing in New York TV. You know, that's where I saw Earth versus the Flying Saucers, all the Harryhausen black and white movies. The Thing, which became one of my favorite movies of all time. And, all kinds of high class, low class, and in between sci-fi movies from the 50s, all played during the 60s in New York. I was too young to realize who was making these movies. I didn't look and say, oh, that's a Roger Corman movie, or that's a Ray Harryhausen movie. I just watched them, and I went out of my way to go see them at the local theater. That's where I saw Giant Behemoth, because it was playing on a double bill with John Paul Jones with Robert Stack, a film no kid wanted to see because it was this historical biography of John Paul Jones, and it was 2 hours, okay? And double billed with it was the Giant Behemoth, okay? I mean, there was a giant thing in the paper of Bob Stack as John Paul Jones, and on the bottom there was a little tiny thing plus the Giant Behemoth with a little shot of the Giant Behemoth, which did not look giant in the newspapers. Anyway, so I said, I got to go see the Giant Behemoth. So that's where I saw that film for the first time. Sat through a bad Bob Stack color film, and then Giant Behemoth came out, and all the kids went wild. Channel 5, WNEW, had a thing on Saturday and Sunday called Adventure Theater that ran on usually 1 to 3 back then, or 1 to 2:30. And they would run sci-fi movies, and they didn't have many, but they constantly ran them over and over and over and over and over. You couldn't miss them, okay? And films like Gog, they had a thing called The Loch Ness Monster, which was a British film made in 1938, which they ran constantly. And they ran a lot of, like Destination Moon, a lot of these kind of films that didn't have a big punch, but they ran them all the time because they owned them. They ran them constantly. So that's where I saw Gog, which is an Ivan Tors movie made in 1955, I think, that became the inspiration for Chopping Mall, because it was about a complex in Arizona that's built 7 levels below the ground. And the first level's where you come in, but then all the levels below were testing stuff, and there was a big computer that ran the place, and they had these 2 robots that ran around and helped people by bringing them tools and stuff. And then a Russian spaceship comes up over, takes control of the computer, and starts killing everybody in the place. And when I was asked to do a film about a killer in a mall, I mentioned this to Steve Mitchell, who was my writing partner on that film. And we decided to just take that GOG template and just change it and make it a super, mall that was going up 3 levels, 4 levels. And that's how that became Chopping Mall. We originally made it under the title Robot, and then it became Killbots, and then it became Chopping Mall, which I'm glad it did because that's the best title for it. When we first tested it as Killbots, no one went to see it. We tested it in Arizona, and it failed. Nobody came in. And Roger pulled the film back to look at it. He says, I can't understand why nobody's going to see this film. It's a good film, and it should be doing some business. Let's watch it again in the screening room and see if we can come up with an idea. So we watched the film again in the screening room. It was Roger and myself and a guy that was a janitor at the place who was changing lights in the theater in the dark. So he's in there changing light bulbs, and I'm not paying attention to him. We're watching the movie. The lights come up finally, and we start discussing what to do. And he turns to me and Roger and says, "Why don't you just call it Chopping Mall?" And I said, "Oh my God." And Roger says the same, "Oh my God," at the same time. And he says, "Where shopping costs you an arm and a leg." And I say, where half off is just the beginning, okay? And he says, "Go make that poster." So I did. I went back and I had a new poster made under the title Chopping Mall. We changed the titles on the prints. Right then, there was only about 4 or 5 prints of it actually made for the test. So we changed the title. We went back to Arizona again in a different location. I think it was Tucson versus Phoenix. And the Tucson play went through the roof. We made a ton of money. And I realized at that point that it's all about audience perception. If you can tell an audience what they think they're going to get, they will come, okay? And so Killbots, Chopping Mall, same movie. Same exact movie. I didn't change a thing in the movie except the titles on the 5 prints. Well, anyway, they made a lot of money. Roger said, "That's it. It's Chopping Mall. Send it out." And we sent it out, and every place it played, it did well. And it was a nice experience to see that movie go out and do such good business. And of course, on home video, it did amazing business. It was in every video store you could imagine. After I graduated college, I went straight to work for Doubleday Books for the Sci-Fi Book Club. I said, "This is a great job. I get to read sci-fi books all day and write about them." So this went on from about 1974 through 77. In 1977, first of all, it was such a great job because the money was good, and it was very close to my home, and it only took me like 15 minutes to get to work. And it was a very laid-back place. They never had anybody standing over you, giving you orders. They just said, we need this by Monday, and if it was there on Monday, they were happy. So at one point, they come in, they say, "We got a new book coming out based on a movie called Star Wars. And they want to send you out to California." And I said, "Well, fine. Put me on a plane." So they did. They put me on a plane to California. And I came out here to California, and I was like smitten. I said, "This is the best place in the world." This was in January, and it was warm out here. And I said, "Wow, this place is great. Lots of hot chicks running around all the time." And they didn't show me a frame of film from Star Wars. They took me to a hotel and put me up there over along Century Boulevard. And they had a room on the top floor where they had all the models from Star Wars and lots of photos. And I remember there was a guy named Charles Lippincott who gave me all this paraphernalia about Star Wars. He says, well, I'm glad you're doing the book. Here's some artwork you might want to use. Give me some transparencies. And I said, wow, these models look great. Any chance of seeing the movie? No, can't show it to you yet. I said, okay, well, and this was like in February. And the movie came out in May. So anyway, I went back. One of the little asides was that he walked over and I was staring at these little intricate models of the X-Wing and the Y-Wing fighters. And he says, the rights to those are available for, I can sell you the rights to this one for like just $10,000. Okay? 10,000 was $1 million to me at that point. But if I'd known better, I would have, sold my car and done whatever I could to pay that $10,000. But I didn't, because who knew that this film was going to go through the roof? Especially since I hadn't seen a frame of it. So I went back, did all the work on the book, wrote the liner notes for the book, and I did a nice cover. Earl Berkey, a very famous artist, did the cover. And I sent it to Lucasfilm, and they approved everything and said, well, that's great. You did a great job. Thank you. And come May, they sent me another ticket to come out to LA to see the movie at a big premiere. And I said, wow, a second trip to LA. Well, I did it. I came out here and I went to the Plitt theaters over here in Santa Monica. Star Wars came on, and this was before it opened. This was about a week before it opened, and came on, and everybody just went wild. I said, this is the best movie I've ever seen. And then they took us by bus to a party in Beverly Hills, where everybody was there. Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, everybody. George Lucas, everybody was at this big party. And everybody was thrilled because they just saw a movie they really enjoyed. I said, Jesus, when that opens next Wednesday, I want to go see it. Again, just to see it. And of course, next Wednesday, I went down to the Chinese theater, and there was lines around the block to see it. There was no way of getting in. I said, man, this film's going to be a huge fucking hit. And I'm saying, geez, I wish I'd bought those rights to that model. But I didn't. But as it was, they were thrilled with me, because I was staying out here for a couple of days more on my own dime. And so that was my little Star Wars experience out here. But it also encouraged me to try to come out here eventually and work and live, which is what I did. So in that, I went back, and I think around, it was 1977 still. And this was in July or August. I just had it with Doubleday. And I said, I got to go try my luck. Got to go. It's not going to happen for me here. I got to be there. I'm sure there's want ads in the paper for directors and writers and stuff. So I packed up my car and I went cross country and ended up here in LA. And then I realized at that point, when I got an apartment, and I gave up. I was engaged to be married. I gave that up. Gave it all up to come out here. And it was a sobering experience when I opened the Sunday Times, and there were no ads for directors, writers, or even PAs. There was just nothing. And I'd have to go to all the studios and submit forms, and it was a big deal. And I said to myself, I don't think this is going to work, but I got to keep trying. That's when, I needed to make money. So that's when the Fangoria story that you read happened.